Photographer Sarah Eckstine is one of 4 Master of Fine Arts candidates showing their thesis exhibitions at university galleries. WGLT's Lauren Warnicki stopped by the gallery to talk with Eckstine about her show. It's called With Love and Rage. Eckstine primarily uses self-portraiture, something she's been doing since she first held a camera. And a heads up, this conversation includes references to the anatomy and sex.
I started taking self-portraits all the way back during high school. And I think looking back at the time, I wasn't really considering it as like a fine art thing. It was more just me documenting myself. But as I have been doing this for the past 10 or 11 years now, looking back, I realized that I started doing it as a way to document myself and the changes happening in my body. I like looking back, and I think of it as like an archive of myself.
Can you talk about the blurred lines between selfies and self-portraiture?
I think the biggest divide for me is using digital versus using film. With film, I think I started doing it because it required me to slow down when I'm taking these pictures. Rather than holding my phone where I can like see my reflection in myself, shooting film, it requires a lot more time to kind of sit with the camera, knowing the technical aspects of using the different types of cameras. It takes a lot more time to focus and frame everything, and I really think that had me like consider the framing a lot more, how I was presenting myself in the picture rather than this very kind of like instantaneous aspect.
So I know you do other styles of photography too. You do concert photography, you've done landscapes, and the choice to come to grad school, was that really about diving more into self-portraiture?
Yes, entirely. When I was doing my applications, I was like, should I put in some of my landscaping concert work? And I decided to just go solely with my self-portraiture and self-representation work, because that is what I really wanted to focus on as kind of the core of my fine art practice.
Yeah. Something that I notice, and we'll dive in a little bit to the more subversive undertones of the work related to your chronic illnesses, but they strike me as boudoir portraits, which are incredibly vulnerable, I think, for the subject. And as both the photographer and the subject, I wonder about how you may wrestle with that vulnerability.
No, it's something I've thought about a lot. It's come up in a lot of my critiques, kind of like that, the interplay between like subject and object with that. And of course, there's a lot of history of like voyeurism in the gaze, especially with nude women in photographs. But I think for me, the fact that I am the one that is taking the picture is a huge part of that, and kind of like reclaiming that gaze and agency with that. And in a lot of my portraits, I keep the camera in them, so you can see 100% that I'm the one taking this picture. And I think it's a little bit different than having the camera on a tripod pointing back at me. It's kind of like the camera is my companion, my partner, and I'm like working with it rather than something that's being like taken of me.
You mentioned right at the top that a lot of the motivation around self-portraiture was watching your body change and wrestling with the changes and symptoms of the illnesses that you deal with. So I'm going to struggle with the pronunciation. So I'm going to let you explain what exactly, those conditions are and how they've affected your life.
So growing up, I was diagnosed with vaginismus, which is a chronic condition that causes involuntary contractions of the vaginal muscles during penetration. And it makes things like inserting in a tampon, having a pelvic exam, and of course penetrative sex extremely painful, if not entirely impossible. And I also have an conjoining condition called vestibulodynia, which is chronic nerve damage in the opening of the vagina. And those two together, as you can imagine, growing up as a young woman, I was not able to kind of have the sex that I feel like all of my peers were having. I wasn't able to go swimming on field trips if I had my period because I wasn't able to use a tampon. And it was extremely alienating as a young woman to be kind of like left out of these things. And I kind of kept to myself because it's not discussed a lot, female sexual health in general, let alone female sexual health when it deals with pain. So I thought for the longest time, like, I'm the only person that's dealing with this. Nobody else kind of like understands what I'm going through.
Did the decision to kind of add the women's and gender studies add on to your master's program, did that come later, or was that always the intention in coming to ISU?
I actually did not know about the WGSS program when I came here, but as soon as I found out about it, I jumped on it immediately. And a couple semesters ago, I did an independent study with Dr. Bailey, who is the director of the WGSS department, and I wanted to make my own flyer that goes in the bathrooms that ISU does. They unfortunately said they were not able to put it in their bathrooms because it dealt with medical terminology, and that was outside their scope of view, but they gave me a little nudge and said, it's an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper horizontally formatted, and kind of gave me the okay to do it anyways. So I designed this flyer about vaginismus that is very kind of like base level introductory, and me and my fellow graduate student Jade, we installed them about 200 flyers around campus in the bathrooms the night before Valentine's Day.
But which felt more vulnerable, kind of being in the medical and activist space or the artistic interpretation of that?
Ironically enough, sometimes I think it's like the medical research aspect of it. For some reason, my writing, to me, words on paper, will feel more vulnerable than a naked photo of me on a gallery wall. And I've been trying to wrestle with that myself, because you would think it would be the opposite, but for some reason, writing to me is just so much more vulnerable, because in the papers that I'm writing and kind of like presenting at the symposiums or whatnot, it is very research-based, but I'm of course pulling from my lived experiences and talking very explicitly about what I've experienced and having like very horrible and traumatic experiences with partners.
I notice in some of the text that you've put out, both related to interactions with medical providers, not believing you, common theme in women's healthcare, and also partners not believing you or not checking in with you. I can't even imagine going through that in some of the most intimate moments of your life, both in the medical setting and then in interactions with partners. And I guess the question is, has this helped?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of my work is rooted in those lived experiences, but then can hopefully encourage other people to kind of speak up about this and provide information to them. Again, like I said, I've been doing self-portraiture for a long time, but for a while I was photographing myself in this very kind of like sterile medical way, because being naked in doctor's offices and having like these old gynecologists that could be my grandfather, like looking up my pants more than any other partner had. It was super kind of like, I felt really alienated from my body as a woman, as a sexual being, as anything. And then slowly I started photographing myself more and more in kind of like sensual positions, and photographing myself like in bed wearing outfits and kind of like underwear and lingerie that I felt super confident in, and kind of using photography as a tool to build back up that confidence in myself.
With Love and Rage is part of Illinois State University's Master of Fine Arts thesis exhibition, and that's at University Galleries in Uptown through March 28th. A free artist's reception is scheduled for next Wednesday at University Galleries. Photographer and MFA candidate Sarah Eckstine spoke with WGLT's Lauren Warnicki.